In this video, I want to quickly show off a FNAF 6 style camera movement. This is optional and this just shows the specific implementation. Here is the overview. It's a smooth or sharp turn between these three directions. First, let's go to our player blueprint and I will be adding on to our old camera code. We can use a boolean variable called use FNAF 6 camera to switch between the two camera styles. Add a branch after your turn camera event. We will only need to use true. For this, I want to make the turn camera event have an input which is in the details panel after you click it. Make it a float, and call it amount. This is the amount we add on to our current turn value. We can get turn value variable and add it to our input amount. We can then set the turn value. It is important to clamp our values between -1 and 1, we don't want our turn values to be out of range. Now get our camera component, from the components list, and we want to set relative rotation. Right-click the new rotation and split struct. We don't need to complicate this, so we will just use a select node, this last one. And get our turn value. We want to add a 1 onto it because our select node starts from option 0 and well our turn values start from -1. We want to sync those numbers up. We can then add a pin to the select node so we have 3 options. We then want to turn our float and round it into an integer. Now we can set our 3 rotations, the first one is -90, then 0, then 90. We have our logic done. We just need to call these functions. I will be using the same widget, the buttons we used with our other camera system, but you can also use key inputs. Anyway, open up the widget and find these events. I want to make a separate video, where I go over code cleanup, but that will be a more generic video. Okay, so find these events which have the turn value and timer. We will replace these with a custom event to set turn camera. FNAF 6 will not need a timer. We can use a branch, and drag the condition onto the event to make it an input. We can then copy this turn value and set timer to the top. Make sure all wires are disconnected. We then want to drag the object into the input. We also want to move object into the same input as target. From that target input, we can call turn camera and the amount would be the same as turn value. Now we can use this event over and over again. So call set turn camera for these on hovered buttons. It's best we go to the input and rename these. You can also see the input types here. Compile and save. If there are errors, just refresh the event on right click. Now we can use this cast to get our variables that we created in our player pawn. Get use FNAF 6 camera. Connect BP player to player. Now the turn value for this one was -1 as we are going to the left. We are going backwards in a list. Next one, just copy and paste. If there is an error, just refresh that node with right click. We want to do the same of connecting. But the turn value is just 1, that's the turn left and right done. We have one last event, which is when we stop unhovering. We don't want anything to happen and this is simply just a branch and a get use FNAF 6 camera on the false. At this point, we can test to see what we have. We should snap between the 3 locations. We now have to do one finally thing, which is making that switch much smoother. We can use a timeline for this. Right click, search for timeline and then name it smooth rotate or something. We then want to use this set relative code, we have done. Disconnect the while line, and then drag it below here. We then want to add a lerp node, this will have an A and B. A will be the current rotation. From this camera, do a get world rotation and split struct so we can get the vectors. We can't do it here, so copy this, and just paste it on this line of code after the set turn value. Right click on the return value Z. We want to promote this to variable being the current Z rotation. This way, we can use the variable here, as A. This is our start position. We need to now work on the alpha using the timeline. The length should be short like 0.5 or 0.8. We then do the basic setup of having a keyframe at 0,0 and a keyframe at the length 0.8 and value of 1. The value is the alpha, so TI goes from 0 to 1. We can now connect it to our timeline. Our timeline was not named, so I open it and double-click newtrack_0 and name it alpha. I am allos going to select all these keyframes, right-click on one of them and click auto to curve out the lines. These are all just optional adjustments. We can now go back to the event graph and drag out our timeline, smooth rotate from the variables list and select play from start, and also if you want to adjust the speed, do a set play rate which can adjust the speed of the timeline. I think I am going to move this to the event begin play. I only need this called once. I want it quite quick, so a rate of 1.5 is good. Now make sure everything is connected and test the game. Hopefully it works. Comment below if it's broken and I will reply. Anyway, consider subscribing and sharing, and see you next time.